fight. Describe. Ring of the bell.
The Black Velvet Ribbon. She was beautiful in a strange, mysterious way. Her hair and her deep, bottomless eyes were as black as the velvet ribbon around her neck. He planned to marry her before the next full moon rose in the autumn sky. On their wedding, he watched her walk towards him up the long aisle. She was dressed in a white gown, a white veil, and carried a bouquet of white flowers. Even her face was ivory white. But below it, around the ivory neck, was the black velvet ribbon. He remembered staring at that ribbon as the strains of the wedding march brought his bride nearer to him. He remembered the curious and shocked looks on the faces of the wedding guests. But then his eyes met hers, and he was drowning in their bottomless darkness. He didn't think of the velvet ribbon during the rest of his wedding day. It was a joyous time, and if people thought his wife was a bit strange, they kept that to themselves. That night, when they were alone, he saw that the ribbon was still there, still circling her lovely neck. "Don't you ever take that ribbon from around your neck?" he asked, hoping his question was a needless one. "You'll be sorry if I do," his wife answered, "so I won't." Her answer disturbed him, but he did not question her further. There was plenty of time for her to change her ways. Their life together fell into a pleasant pattern. They were happy, as most newly married couples are. He found her to be a perfect wife. Well, nearly perfect. Although she had a great number of dresses and wore a different one every day, she never changed the black velvet ribbon. This ribbon began to be the test of their marriage. When he looked at her, his eyes would inevitably fall to her neck. When he kissed her, he could feel the ribbon tightening around his own throat. "Won't you please take that ribbon from around your neck?" he asked her time and time again. "You'll be sorry if I do, so I won't." This was always her answer. At first, it teased him. Then it began to grate on his nerves. Now it was beginning to infuriate him. "You'll be sorry if I do. You'll be sorry if I do." One day, he tried to pull the ribbon off after she had repeated her answer like a mechanical doll. It wouldn't come loose from her neck. He realized then, for the first time, that the ribbon had no beginning and no end. It circled her neck like a band of steel. He had drawn back from her in disgust that day. Things were not the same with them after that. At the breakfast table, the black ribbon seemed to mock him as he drank his suddenly bitter coffee. In the afternoon, outside, the ribbon made a funeral out of the sunlight. But it was at night when it bothered him the most. He knew he could live with it no longer. "Either take that ribbon off, or I will," he said one night to his wife of only 4 weeks. "You'll be sorry if I do, so I won't." She smiled at him, and then fell off to sleep. But he did not sleep. He lay there staring at the hated ribbon. He had meant what he had said. If she would not take off the ribbon, he would. As she lay sleeping and unsuspecting, he crept out of bed and over to her sewing box. He had seen the small, sharp scissors she kept there. It was thin enough, he knew, to slip between the velvet ribbon and her soft neck. Gripping the scissors in his trembling hands, he walked softly back to the bed. He came up to where she lay and stood over her. Her head was thrown back on the pillow, and her throat with the black velvet ribbon around it rose ever so slightly with her breathing. He bent down, and with one swift movement, he forced the thin blade of the scissors under the ribbon. Then with a quick, triumphant snip, he severed the ribbon that had come between them. The black velvet ribbon fell away from his wife's neck, and her head rolled off the bed and landed on the floor with a thump. She was muttering, "You'll be sorry. You'll be sorry." Where the Bad Kids Go. I must have been 6 or 7 when I lived in Lebanon. The country was ravaged by war at the time, and murders were common and frequent. I remember during a particularly vicious era when the bombings rarely stopped, I would stay at home sitting in front of my television watching a very, very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes and contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believe it was a thinly veiled attempt on the part of the media to use scare tactics to keep kids in place, because the moral of every episode revolved around very uptight ideologies. Stuff like, bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, and bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was very weird, and in Arabic to top it off. I didn't understand much of it, but for the most part, the images were very graphic and comprehensive. The thing that stuck with me the most, however, was the closing scene. It remained much the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in on an old, rusted, closed door. As it got closer to the door, strange and sometimes even agonizing screams would become more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for children's programming. Then a text would appear on the screen in Arabic writing. "That's where bad kids go." Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalistic photographer. That show had been in my mind all my life, popping up in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I had enough and decided to do some research. I finally managed to uncover the location of the studio where much of that channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research, and eventually traveling on site, I found out it was now desolate and had been abandoned after the big war ended. I entered the building with my camera. It was burnt out from the inside. Either a fire had broken out or someone had wanted to incinerate all the wooden furniture. After a few hours of cautiously making my way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated, out-of-the-way room. After having to break through a few old locks and managing to break the heavy door open, I remained frozen in the doorway for several long minutes. Traces of blood, feces, and tiny bone fragments lay scattered across the floor. It was a small room and an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me, though, what made me turn away and never want to come back, was the bolted, caged microphone hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room. Hey, boys and girls, make sure you watch the Salt Lake live stream every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Central at twitch.tv/WellHeyProductions, where we have games, giveaways, and more.